Howie Roseman gave Vic Fangio a lot of new options for his defense on all three levels. How should he shuffle around this personnel? I've got some ideas coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. It's a Tuesday edition of the show. I'm your host, Louis DiBiase. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. Monday through Friday, we've got podcasts for you as well after games on Sunday. Nobody's posting more for you on any Philadelphia Eagles platform, so make sure you subscribe on all platforms and on YouTube as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 back in bonus bets to use across the entire app. The NFL trade deadline came and went. The deadline was exactly 2 hours ago, 4 p.m. Eastern time. The Philadelphia Eagles made more moves than anybody before the deadline, although the New York Jets gave them a run for their money today, trading away Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams, but Philadelphia made 3 trades over the past week, getting Michael Carter from the New York Jets, Jaire Alexander from the Baltimore Ravens, and then Jaelan Phillips yesterday from the Miami Dolphins. Howie Roseman left no stone unturned, gave Vic Fangio a lot more options to figure out some of the inconsistencies of this defense. Any question marks that there was on that side of the ball, Howie Roseman, at least, I don't want to say he answered those questions by bringing in these 3 players, but he offered more solutions for Fangio at the edge rusher position, at the cornerback position, and now it's up for Vic, the best mind, in my opinion, in all of the NFL on the defensive side of the football, to figure out what you want to do with all of these moving parts. I mean, Nolan Smith was also activated today to the practice window, coming off injured reserve. Brandon Graham set to make his return to the lineup this Monday night against the Green Bay Packers. You add in Phillips and Carter and Alexander, and it's like, okay, this defense, they were pretty good. They were the stronger unit through the first 8 games of the year, but what are we doing at the third cornerback spot? What are we doing at edge rusher? There's a lot of things to figure out now. How do we make all of these players fit? How does everybody get on the field? Playing time? What combinations of players do we have out there for different personnel packages? That's what Fangio has to figure out, and I'm sure he's been working on it all week. My personal plan for the defense, if I was the Eagles defensive coordinator, here's how I would approach things. Let's start with the defensive line. You bring in Jaelan Phillips, you get Nolan Smith back, you get Brandon Graham back. That's 3 edge rushers that you're adding to a group that had the past few weeks Jaelan Hunt featured, Josh Uche, and then, of course, Patrick Johnson as well. Jahad Campbell was also playing some edge rusher, but I imagine now he moves back to inside linebacker permanently, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes here. For me, at edge rusher, where you now have 5 to 6 pretty dependable players, here's the order of which I would go rotating these guys. Everybody is going to play to a degree. I think there will be a main 3 to 4 guys that play, and then there's a 5th one sprinkled in. I still think Nolan Smith should be featured as your number 1 edge rusher when he comes back. I think he's the most dependable player at this position against the run. I thought his pass rushing ability through those first 4 games of the year before he was placed on IR was very underrated. I think Nolan is your go-to player at that spot. And then I think it's kind of like 2A, 2B between Jaelan Phillips and Jaelan Hunt. Like, obviously, Phillips is the veteran, the first-round talent, the more proven pedigree between the two, has more sacks this year, has a better, pressure percentage, win rate. Like, Phillips will be the 2A. But Jaelan Hunt, again, he's the future at this position opposite Nolan Smith. And he's been getting better and better every single week. So kind of like Jahad Campbell at linebacker, I don't think his growth would get stunted by Phillips coming in, but I don't want to bury Hunt and reduce his snap count for the sake of just 2025. Same thing with Jahad Campbell versus Nakobe Dean. Jaelan Phillips could earn a contract extension in Philadelphia, but he is a UFA, and if he has a really good end of the year in Philly, we know that player likely is going to price himself out like Josh Sweat did last year and Milton Williams. So Jaelan Hunt, I still want to be not the number 3 like he was last year to Nolan Smith and Josh Sweat. I want it to be a 2A, 2B thing where the snaps are probably in favor of Jaelan Phillips, but it's like 55-45 in favor of Phillips at that spot, or 60-40, because Jaelan Hunt has been getting better and better, as I mentioned. And you can make the argument, and I think it's a pretty sound argument, that the last 2 wins against Minnesota and New York, he's been the best player you've had on defense when you count all 3 levels. When I do my offensive and defensive player of the week, every Eagles win on our Locked On Eagles YouTube community page and on Twitter as well, or on X, I've made Jaelan Hunt the defensive player of the week 2 weeks in a row with a pick 6, a sack, has led the Eagles in pressures on the edge. So I do think it'll be a rotation with Phillips featured as the 2A. But remember with Jaelan too, he's had 2 very serious leg injuries, and I don't want to put too much on his plate. I think he's been in a 3-man rotation already in Miami with, Robinson and Chubb. And he's been kind of the change-up fastball, almost the Josh Uche for the Dolphins. And he's been really heating up over the last couple games. He has 3 sacks in the past month. I think Phillips could also benefit from not having to play, 70 to 80% of the snaps. So I would do it in that order of Nolan Smith as the clear number 1, Jaelan Phillips 2A, Jaelan Hunt 2B, and then Josh Uche is your number 4 fastball in obvious pass rushing situations. I still want Uche a part of this rotation. He's somebody that they didn't really have the flexibility to use last year. They were a 3-man rotation after Brandon Graham went down on the edge. It was Nolan Smith, Jaelan Hunt, and Josh Sweat. To have Uche now as your 4th guy, considering the underrated season that he's had, and not just rushing the passer, but he's been pretty dependable as well as a run defender, more so than I would have expected from him this year. That's a really good number 4. And so I think he's that 4th guy that does still play a good amount of the snaps. And then Brandon Graham is at number 5. It's unfortunate for BG. He probably doesn't care because I think he just wanted to come back and have some sort of role with this franchise, be in that locker room, be a leader on and off the field. But I mean, at least for me, BG, I thought had the perfect ending to his career last year in Philadelphia. And the fact that he's coming back now and he's going to be like your 5th guy that I don't want to say he barely plays. And it's great to have him as depth, and he can play both inside and out. He has that versatility. And again, he has a lot of value even when he's not in the field. It is kind of anticlimactic that he's coming back and he's going to be a reserve backup at this point. And he will dress, but I don't think, him and Uche might kind of share snaps as that 4th guy, kind of like Phillips and Hunt will as that 2nd guy. But I think Uche's been playing too well this year, and he's been kind of like Hunt heating up over the last couple games. He's been playing too well to take him off the field for, we'll see what BG looks like, but I think Uche's the better player as of right now. So if I'm Vic Fangio, that's how I'm using that rotation. It's Smith, Phillips, Hunt, Uche, and Graham in that order on the edge. At linebacker, I talked about it last week. Now that there's basically no snaps for Jahad Campbell on the edge, unless you're running a bigger package where you're running 3 defensive tackles out there, and you're running a base where Nakobe Dean, Zach Bond, and Jahad Campbell are on the field, I could see Campbell playing on the edge in that kind of scenario. But for me, the majority of the time now, the Eagles are going to have Jahad Campbell as an inside linebacker because they don't need him to play those edge reps. Now they have 5 guys on the edge, not named Jahad Campbell, they're trying to get snaps for. So for me at linebacker, now you go back to featuring Jahad Campbell over Nakobe Dean. Yes, Nakobe Dean should still play in the red zone, base packages, obvious running situations. I do want him to rotate in. I think he should rotate in with Jahad Campbell. I don't think Campbell should get 100% of the snaps, but I do think Jahad should be featured over Nakobe. And not featured meaning it's, 51 to 49. I want it to be at least 60-40, maybe 65-35. Jahad Campbell's been really good this year, and he is the future of this position. So now that they don't need him to play on the edge, and I think the growing pains were there anyway for Campbell, let him go back to the spot he's more comfortable with, that he was playing at an elite level at before Nakobe came back. So that's what I would do at linebacker. And then in the secondary, there's a lot of moving parts. They're going to kind of see how this thing plays out. But my first approach at corner would be to see if Jaire Alexander can be the outside corner opposite Quinyon Mitchell, so Cooper DeJean does not have to play the boundary. He can play in the slot still, where, as Vic Fangio said last week, Cooper DeJean is the best slot cornerback in all of football. Excuse me. If Jaire Alexander can be an upgrade over Adoree Jackson, over Keely Ringo, over Jacorian Bennett, that would give the Eagles flexibility to not need DeJean to play out of position. So I'm not banking on that. I think there's a chance Alexander is your starting slot. Maybe it's Michael Carter on the inside and Cooper DeJean's on the outside. Maybe Alexander and Carter are not good enough and it's still Ringo, Bennett, or Jackson on the boundary and you keep Coop in the slot. But I think they're going to try everything. They're going to see what works in practice starting this week with all these guys. They're going to compete, these 5 players behind Quinyon and Coop. But my first thing that I would try out is, I know he's been a slot corner a lot of his career, but Alexander has inside-out versatility. Let's see what he has on the boundary. If he can, we know what we have in Adoree right now at that spot, in Ringo, in Jacorian and Bennett. We know Carter's not an outside corner. Let's just see what Alexander is. And then if we have our answer, okay, now let's approach this with, is it Alexander or Carter in the slot? Or can Jacorian Bennett be someone that's an upgrade over all these guys? So my third thing for the Eagles defense to figure out all these moving parts is see what Jaire Alexander can do before making a definitive decision on where Cooper DeJean plays the rest of 2025. Let me know what your plan would be. Hit us up on X at LockdownBirds, at DiBiase LOE. You can always hit us up as well on our YouTube community page as well at Locked On Eagles. Now that Howie Roseman has made a lot of moves, a lot of trades over the last week, what are the remaining roster questions for this year's team? We'll get into it coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by BILT. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. That's where BILT comes in. BILT is changing the game by turning your rent payments into real rewards that you can actually use. You pay rent through BILT, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed towards hundreds of hotels and airlines, a future rent payment, your next Lyft ride, and more. But BILT isn't just about rent, it's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. I love that BILT is your rent finally working for you. You're earning points every month on something that you already have to pay. Whether you're grabbing food at a favorite local restaurant or heading to the gym, you're still earning rewards. BILT has made everyday life feel more rewarding, from your neighborhood to your travel plans. Turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use that link so they know that we sent you. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. The NFL trade deadline officially did pass at 4 p.m. today. Howie Roseman meeting with the media. Nothing really crazy that he talked about, although the big takeaway for me, he was asked about A.J. Brown's trade status, and I like the quote that Howie gave. He says they're trying to be a great team, and it's hard to do that without great players. A.J. Brown is a great player. They are not trading him. They were not interested in moving him, just like Adam Schefter reported. Not sure how certain quote-unquote insiders are going to make their money now after the deadline without just spamming us with Brown trade rumors. I don't want to say how he completely closed the door on any sort of possibility that he's not an Eagle long-term based on the comments that he made today, but if A.J. Brown was on the trade block and they weren't happy with him or they were thinking about getting rid of him, I don't think Howie would have had the tone he did today or would have had that kind of response. And again, Howie Roseman doesn't give up good. Like, he's not Jerry Jones. Unless A.J. Brown is doing sit-ups in the driveway like Terrell Owens did and yelling at Jalen Hurts on the sidelines and just being a complete team cancer, I just don't think you'll see Howie Roseman ever give up on this kind of player. Unless he's offered, unless Jacksonville says, here, you can have 2 first-round picks and Brian Thomas and a third, or what, or the Cleveland Browns say, we'll give you Myles Garrett and Jerry Jeudy and a first-round pick. Howie Roseman's in the business of acquiring elite talent, not getting rid of them. And unless A.J. Brown says, I want to trade and I'm not playing for this team again, then I don't see it happening. I just don't see it happening. And A.J. Brown might continue to post on social media when he's frustrated, when he doesn't get the ball, but I think the Eagles I'm starting to figure out that I think they're just okay with dealing with that. The reward of having A.J. Brown is worth putting up with that. So outside of that, though, he talked about BG coming back, how they were in constant communication, how he owes it to the fans and this organization to continue to try to improve this roster when things don't always go right with free agent signings and draft picks, and loved hearing that as well, that he doesn't settle. And that was the theme of this week, bringing in multiple cornerback options in Jaire Alexander and Michael Carter, bringing in Jaelan Phillips on the edge. Again, like I said earlier, no stone left unturned when Howie Roseman is your general manager. But the roster, I do still think, has some questions for the remainder of 2025. Like, I feel a lot better about cornerback with Alexander and Carter in the fold. I feel, even though I was pretty comfortable with the Eagles' edge rusher position, now that you add Jaelan Phillips, I think it's a strength of the team. I think you can win because of your edge rusher position again, now that Nolan Smith is back as well in BG, whereas the last few weeks, because of injuries and inconsistent play, it felt like you were winning with those guys outside of Jalix Hunt. So I really do think he did a good job of filling any remaining holes that they had in 2025, but it's not like, again, these moves are, you're bringing in Myles Garrett, right? You're bringing in Denzel Ward. It wasn't a definitive trade deadline where you don't have to worry. I do still think of the remaining questions left on the roster this year that we have to see get answered before the playoffs. One of them still is corner. It's still very much up in the air what that third spot is going to look like if any of these other five guys behind Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean can find some level of consistency where you think you can win with that position. And you're not figuring out every week, okay, this guy sucked, so let's put in this one. Oh, that didn't work. Let's put in this one. And you go through all these different combinations of Cooper inside, Cooper outside, Bennett on the outside, Alexander on the inside, Carter on the inside, Coop on the outside. Like, I hope eventually somebody finds some consistent floor. And I'm not saying they're going to look like Darius Slay from 2024, but it can't be as inconsistent as it's been this year. And I do think now, just based on law of averages, adding in Alexander and Carter, 5 different options, one of them eventually has to heat up and play a consistent level of football the rest of the way, where they're not a clear and obvious liability that opposing offenses can target. And I think one of these guys will step up. My money is personally on Jaire Alexander. Maybe it is Michael Carter. Maybe it still is Keely Ringo or Jacorian Bennett. I saw a tweet today that was really fascinating, and I couldn't believe my eyes that this is true, but it actually is. Listen to this stat about Adoree Jackson. Let me pull this up. So it was about Sauce Gardner getting traded to the Colts. Sauce Gardner has faced opponents' number one receivers on 45.5% of his coverage matchups. When targeted, he has forced tight windows, which is less than 1 yard of separation, at 52% of the time. Number 2 is Pat Surtain. Number 3 is Quinyon Mitchell. Number 4 is Max Melton. Number 5, Adoree Jackson. So even Adoree Jackson has had some ups this year. He's had a lot of downs, but kind of an unbelievable stat that Adoree Jackson is 5th this year. He has the 5th highest percentage of snaps where he allows less than a yard of separation when targeted. So one of these guys, I'm feeling pretty good that they can be, again, a worse version of what you had last year in Darius Slay, but he's not just this guy that's going to get completely picked on. So corner is still, I think, the biggest question as we head into the home stretch of this season. But I also think, like, tight end, I was kind of interested in the idea of maybe trading for like a David Njoku type of player today from the Cleveland Browns, or entertaining the idea of a reunion with Zach Ertz after the Commanders loss on Sunday night against Seattle. Jaden Daniels got hurt. Washington's clearly, I think, out of it for the rest of this season from a perspective of competing for the division and the playoffs. So I would have liked that kind of idea, because they are still one injury away, a Dallas Goedert injury, which feels inevitable every year, from being in trouble at tight end again. Now, using that sixth offensive lineman has really helped mask those deficiencies. But I think that's something that I would have liked them to add before the deadline. And I would also say safety. Safety is pretty thin right now. You have three, with Marcus Epps going to injured reserve. You have Reed Blankenship, Drew Makuba, and Sidney Brown. That's really it. You're one injury away from having some real question marks there. Now, I will say, glass half full perspective, Cooper DeJean and Michael Carter do have safety versatility, so I think they're also taking that into an account when they're going light at that position. So I think, I was asked after the deadline, what are the questions we need to answer now down the stretch on this roster? It's, can they find a certain level of consistency at that CB3 spot now that they have 5 different options to work with? Can Dallas Goedert stay healthy the rest of the way? I think that's very important. And then the safeties too. Are the safeties, is it not deep enough? Can Blankenship and Makuba stay healthy? I think those are the 3 spots that we're still going to watch the rest of the way. And obviously they can win with those spots. Right now they're winning because of tight end, with Dallas Goedert 7 touchdowns this year, leading the league. But yeah, I think those are still kind of the up in the air positions where we're not sure down the stretch how they'll look. I think there is a scenario where all 3 are strengths of this roster. I think right now all 3 are strengths of the roster, but the depth is definitely something I want to continue to monitor as the year goes on. We will wrap up this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, I'm going to tell you why these next 2 games are the most important of the 2025 season. I'll tell you why coming up right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game and you want to ride the hot hand, which lately for the 76ers has been Tyrese Maxey, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score to the fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets. That's right, $300. All you got to do is win that first $5 bet. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL podcast, 2 episodes a day, Monday through Friday. Tyler the Madman Rowland gets you started in the morning with a shot of football espresso. Then Tony Wiggins, the barber, takes you into the barbershop during the afternoon to talk some ball, talk some shop. 2 Locked On NFL episodes a day, Monday through Friday, wherever you get Locked On Eagles on all audio platforms and on YouTube as well. I do think when you look at the Eagles coming back from the bye at 6-2, this past week of games was very good to the Birds. A lot of teams lost that helped the Eagles in this race to win the division, to be the number 1 seed in the NFC. The Dallas Cowboys lost yesterday to the Arizona Cardinals. Washington is out of it for the year now without their quarterback and Jaden Daniels. They also lost to the Seattle Seahawks. You look at the Panthers upset the Green Bay Packers. That's big for the 1 seed for Philly. The Vikings upset the Detroit Lions, another top-tier team in this conference that lost yesterday. So the Rams won, which doesn't help. But outside of that, this week, the bye week was really good to Philly in that pursuit of the NFC's number 1 seed. And the NFC East, I think they pretty much at this point have locked up. I mean, they have 3 more wins than second place, with Dallas and Washington both having 3 wins. So the division feels pretty comfortable right now. That 1 seed's going to be a race to the end. Tampa Bay also just with 2 losses right now, right on the Eagles, breathing down their neck. But Philly did get catapulted into that number 1 seed, so that's big. Why I think these next 2 games are so important when they've had so many important games already. They had that Tampa game, which could decide the 1 seed. They took care of business. They had that game against the Rams where they took care of business. Another team that's 6-2 that's going to push you for the top seed in the conference. Getting those head-to-head tiebreakers are massive. But I think these 2 games are so crucial because the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions, if you can take these 2 teams down, if you get to 8-2, not only are those two teams still going to beat up on each other in the NFC North, so both teams, like, some more losses are coming. But then, if you can take advantage of this 2-game stretch, you own tiebreakers against every other top 4 team in the NFC that could seriously push you for that top seed. Because at that point, you'll have the tiebreaker over the Rams, the tiebreaker over the Buccaneers, the tiebreaker over the Lions, the tiebreaker over the Packers. There's nobody else. Like, those 4 and the Eagles, those are your 5 best teams in this conference. And the Eagles have already gotten 2 wins against those teams. So take advantage. Like, this is it. We know how important getting the 1 seed is for the Eagles to get to the Super Bowl. When the playoffs runs through Lincoln Financial Field, the Eagles tend to go to the Super Bowl. It's happened in 2017, 2004, 2017, 2022, 2024. Now, did they get a little bit lucky last year as the 2 seed that the Commanders upset Detroit in the divisional round? Like, yeah, of course. But we know home field advantage throughout the playoffs, especially when the weather gets a little bit crazy, that is a benefit to the Eagles. It is so hard to play in Philadelphia in January. And so these 2 games, like, they're tough. The Green Bay Packers, I mean, they lost to the Panthers and clearly are this Jekyll and Hyde contender. But they have a really high ceiling, too. And going to Lambeau on Monday Night Football, when the Packers know they need this after suffering that it was kind of a trap game for them. It feels like they were almost looking ahead to the revenge game, losing to the Eagles in the playoffs last year, trying to prove that they are as good as the former champs that are still the team to beat in this conference. It almost feels like it was a look-ahead game, and they lost to Carolina. They're going to want to take care of business on Monday night. It's not going to be easy. The Detroit Lions as well, they're going to really take this one personal. It's going to feel a little bit extra important to them because I still think the Lions in their heads believe that they're the best team in the NFC. And like guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown have talked a lot of smack that they're kind of like the Saints from 2017 and 2018 where the Eagles never got to see them in the postseason, but the Saints always believed, like, if we got them, well, they did in 2018, but in 2017, I should say, they like to say if we got them that year, we were going to take them down. That's kind of the Lions last year. Like, if we didn't get upset, Philly would have had to come to Detroit, and it would have been a whole nother ball game. Like, I think Detroit feels like that was their Super Bowl that kind of got robbed from them. So that's going to be an extra motivating game for them too, not just because of seeding, but again, these teams are trying to prove that they're just as good as Philadelphia. You're going to get, as the former champs, that's the 1 seed in the conference, you're going to get everybody's best shot week in and week out. And you need to make sure that coming off the bye, you're ready to go. Normally, the Eagles play up to their competition. They're going to need to do that these next couple games. This is a massive opportunity, and the schedule gets pretty tough. Not going to lie. I mean, you've got Green Bay, Detroit, Dallas, Chicago, the Chargers. Like, these next 5 games are not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. But that's the reality as a first-place team with a first-place schedule. Take advantage and get a couple wins here, and you're going to be playing January football in Philadelphia. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Until tomorrow, thanks as always for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.